So yesterday, the Crimson Tide traveled to the swamp and found themselves in an absolute slugfest, one that we need to talk about because there's a lot to take away from this game. Before we do though, y'all know the drill. I want to hear from you. Hop down to the comments, give me a Y for yes or an N for no. Are you surprised at how this game went down? And let me know what you're thinking. If you are new to the channel, be sure to subscribe, hit that bell notification. I do constant college football content and I would love to have you along for the journey. And if you did enjoy this content, be sure to like and comment down below. Those interactions are massive to content creators such as myself. But with all that being said, we need to talk about this game because college football as a whole yesterday was sensational. This year thus far has been incredible. And I'm going to talk more about the games that happened outside of the Alabama-Florida game yesterday. Tomorrow at around 5:30, 5:45 Central Standard Time, I'll be doing a live stream with a very special guest re-going over this game, the Oklahoma game, and all the other ones. You don't want to miss it. I would love to have you there, so be sure to check that out. But now let's turn our attention to this game right here. Because first and foremost, hats off to the Florida Gators. You were put in a scenario where Alabama came out firing early and jumped out to a big lead, but you didn't lay down. You played a hard-nosed brand of football, and hats off to you. The amount of fight and want that the Florida Gators showed yesterday is really impressive. I mean, this team right here took it to Alabama in a time where they were down big. And so that speaks a lot about this team. Now, on the flip side, I really am very pleased with the Crimson Tide in this sense right here. For the first time this season, they were really tested with a young quarterback in a hostile environment in his first road game as a starter. And even though Florida came back and put this game in a precarious situation, when Alabama ultimately needed a score, Bryce Young marched that offense down the field and found a way to get a score. That right there said a lot about not only Bryce Young in his first start in a hostile environment, but about the team as a whole and their willingness and want to fight. That was an awesome response drive, one that we need to remember. Because right now, both teams yesterday played a heck of a ball game as far as a hard-nosed, physical type of football game. Let's really break down what Florida did though, because the Gators came into this game with the #1 rushing attack in the nation, and they were very successful at rushing the football. In fact, at the end of the game, they averaged 5.7 yards a rush. And right then and there, that right there is a very high average against a Crimson Tide defense. Now, I think there's a few ways to look at this. First and foremost, very few teams, if any, that the Crimson Tide are going to play from here on out are going to have a similar rushing scheme at all to what it is Florida did. Their rushing scheme is very hard to stop because they have a quarterback that can do a power run type style. He's an athletic guy, but when you have that option of the quarterback doing a power run, a running back who's been hyper effective, it opens up your offense in multiple ways. However, I do want to talk about Alabama's defensive front because Will Anderson had himself a game, but the interior of that Alabama defensive line has got to find a way to generate pressure because right now Will Anderson's doing it. Drew Sanders is generating pressure, but we're not getting consistent pressure from the interior, and that was one of the reasons the Florida Gators had some success running the football. Now, at the end of the day, I'm not saying it's all gloom and doom and that Alabama's interior isn't good. Alabama's interior has got a lot of talent, a lot of really good players, and they showed flashes yesterday. It's just turning those flashes into consistency. But it is still only week 3. That's one thing we have all got to remember. It's only week 3. It's a long season ahead of us. And this game right here is going to be a massive net positive for the Crimson Tide. Walking into a hostile environment in which the opposition really played a solid ball game, had an idea of what they wanted to do, and even though they got down, they didn't quit, and they took it to Alabama. Alabama being able to go through that and pull out on top, I think is going to be a huge, huge learning tool for the Crimson Tide. Now, on the flip side, let's talk about Alabama's offense and how they were able to affect the game against Florida's defense. First and foremost, we have to give credit to where credit is due. Florida's defensive front, they have some dudes. That's something I talked about before this game. I had a lot of questions about Florida's defense, but the one area of Florida's defense I kept saying, like, hey, this area right here, they can do something. It's just about consistency, was that defensive front. At the end of the game, Alabama only averaged 3.3 yards per rush, but the interesting thing is that's a little bit misleading. Alabama isn't running the football the way they would like to right now. There's certainly no argument there. But when you see that 3.3 average, it's a little misleading in the sense that when Alabama's running backs needed to get the first down or needed to get the gain, they were able to get it. And in fact, Brian Robinson, an individual that many of you pointed to being very impressed with yesterday, had 15 carries for 78 yards with an average of 5.2 yards per carry. So he was out there doing his thing. He's having a really good season. He's looking like a really solid running back. Jace McClellan was out there really positively affecting the game in the passing setting. So Alabama's running backs are getting the job done in different ways right now, but there is no argument that the running game needs to come about with a bit more consistency. Ultimately, though, the reason why I am not too worried about the running game right now is because I think, in my opinion, it's hard for us to ask a lot of the running game when the offensive line is still such a work in progress. And there's really no way around this. The one thing we can take away from this game right here, or the multiple things we can take away from this game, after the Crimson Tide jumped out to that early lead and Florida came back, I was wondering how Alabama was going to respond. It's a young offense. Would they get concerned? Would they start playing outside their means? And no, they didn't. Bryce Young is calm, cool, and collected at all times. That cat is special. That dude right there has got some sauce. And in no way am I saying he played a perfect game. Look, the hostile environment did affect him. We saw that with the multiple delay of games, but it didn't rattle him. And that right there is the most important thing to me. So Florida played a heck of a game, no quit, took it to Alabama, but Alabama was able to match that. Not only when they needed a touchdown, the offense marching down the field and getting that score, but also when the two-point conversion happened. The Alabama defense held the Florida Gators to not getting that two-point conversion, which ultimately was the difference in this game. So it's one of those situations where there's a lot to learn from this game. Aspects of Alabama's team have got to get better if they want to get where they want to go. So I've said this before, a win is a win, but there's things we can take away from this. And I'm sure an individual such as Nick Saban is actually happy this game went down the way it did, because it shows that Alabama has some things they can work on, they can improve on. And Nick Saban is the ultimate tactician. He can now go to the media and say, you see that rat poison almost got us, but now I can go to my team and say, that's what it is almost like. You were that close to having defeat tasted. So let's not have that again. It's going to be very interesting to see how Alabama responds. I'm looking in this next game against Southern Miss for them to establish the running game much more consistently and to really try and get some things hammered out on the offensive line. But it's much harder to get a real gauge of how much progress will be made against an opponent like Southern Miss. No offense to them. I've said it before, I'm going to say it again. Hats off to the Florida Gators. I was wrong in a lot of areas about how competitive this game would be, and Florida was very impressive yesterday. I'm not going to take away from where credit is due. The Florida Gators came out and they played with a lot of heart. They played with a lot of fire, a lot of intensity, and it showed. And I'm happy that after Alabama had a sluggish period in this game, they were able to ultimately match that fire, match that intensity, and find a way to win the game with a young offense, with a young quarterback, and with the defense ultimately getting a stop when it mattered the most. This is a win that you can take a lot away from. There's a lot to build on and a lot to improve on, but a lot of positives to take away in how this win came about. In no way am I claiming it's perfect, and if Alabama wants to win another national championship, there are things that are going to have to be improved on. But this game right here was an awesome piece to put in the back pocket of experience for this Crimson Tide team, having that adversity and then fighting through it. Hop down to the comments. Let me know what you're thinking about this game. It was a ton of fun to watch. It's a game that I'm going to be rewatching again today, and then we're going to talk much more about it tomorrow on the live stream around 5:30. I'd love to see you there, so if you can make it, stop on by. We're going to be having a great time talking some football before Monday Night Football ultimately kicks off. That's it. See ya.